Okay, from previous section, we have already learned we could use the linear correlation coefficient R to measure if there is a linear correlation between variable X and variable Y, right? So if we already know there is a linear correlation, then we will try to find what is that straight line. After we know we could use a straight line to express all the dots, right? We still need to figure out what is that line. So this is the regression part. So today we're going to talk about how to find the equation, of that straight line. And that straight line should be best fit all the points. So the points will be the paired sample data, right? We only focus on how to get the regression line, and we will just ignore the hypothesis test part. Okay, so let's check the definition of regression line. So just like said, we need to find a line to fit all the dots, right? And the best fit line, we will say it's called a regression line. And we will use the method called the least squared method. But you don't have to memorize that one. You only need to know the best straight line to fit all the data is called a regression line. So this is the regression equation. We use y hat equals b0 plus b1x. Of course, it's just a straight line equation, right? We also have the intercept and the slope. But in this equation, you have the x variable. Here, x variable has the name called independent variable. So it's the independent variable, but y is called the dependent variable, okay? Y is called a dependent variable. Y hat is called a dependent variable. So how can we find the equation? This is just some notations for the regression line. If this is the sample, then we will know we use the sample notation B0, B1. And for the Y variable, we use Y hat, because it's just the response variable, it's the dependent variable. We use y hat, it's the sample, right? But if from the population, we're going to use beta 0, beta 1 to represent the intercept and the slope. Of course, before we do the calculation, we always need to check the requirements. So we just quickly go through this. Just like the linear correlation coefficient, regression is still need the quantitative data. If it's not a number, then we cannot write the regression equation, right? And we still need to check the scatter plots. We will see all the dots. If there is a straight line pattern. Okay, if there is a straight line pattern. Sometimes, after you draw all the scatter plots, maybe you will find that there is a pattern, but it's not a linear pattern. Okay, so maybe the pattern is nonlinear. Then we could not use the regression line we could not to find the regression line because it's not a straight line. So we could check all the outliers. We should remove all the outliers because this one is also very sensitive. So, okay, we also need to check the remaining part. So we will quickly go through, skip this part. Let's go to check how to get the slope and intercept. So this one is just tell you how can we get the value of the B1 and the B0. But when you check these two formulas, you will find it's not easy, right? Every time we should get the standard deviation for x and the standard deviation for y. And we also need to get the answer based on the r. After we get to the B1, we could use the mean value of x and the mean value of y and the value of B1 to get what's the B0. So this one is not easy to calculate. We will check this formula, because this formula is easy to calculate. But make sure you check the textbook or my PowerPoint for the correct form of the formula, because here I don't know why the parenthesis is not shown here. Okay, so this will be the formula to help you calculate the intercept and the slope. So it's very similar to the formula of r, right? We still need to figure out what's the sigma xy term, sigma x squared term, sigma x, sigma y. So I would say you still need to list the table. If you already listed the table when you do your r, then you can use the same table to calculate the B1 and B0. B1 and B0. So we still need to round our answer to 3 significant digits. We still need to round our answer to 3 significant digits. Okay, let's check. Of course, we could use the technology to find it. So we will check the requirement. Then we could use the software to help us to find the value of slope and intercept. You only need to find the value in your output. Okay, now you could even to write your regression equation. So if we use the formula, we will just pick the second formula, the complicated one, okay, to do, and we do not use this formula. This formula looks simple, but not easy to calculate. We will just try to use the second formula. Remember what is second formula? It looks very complicated, but you have already used the table. You already used the table to get the R value. You will still use that table, the value of table, to find the B1 and B0. Okay? So this is also from the step. So we have this one. We have bad model if the regression equation does not appear to be useful to make predictions. So we call it bad model. And if this equation will be good to predict, then we will say that it's good model. It's just some concepts, so maybe you don't have to know this part. This is based on making predictions. Okay, so maybe we just stop here. We just stop at how to use this complicated formula. Let's see. We only need to use know how to use the complicated formula to find what's the B1, B0, then write your regression equation. So that, I guess that's enough for chapter 10, because chapter 10 is an introduction for the correlation and the regression. So I think for the chapter 10, I will only ask you to know what is the R, linear correlation coefficient. So only measure the linear correlation between two variables, x and y, okay? So, and you also need to know how to get the value of R. And you should need to know how to interpret your R value. We actually do not use R value to explain. We use the R squared value to explain. And for 10.2 regression, we only need to know x variable is the independent variable, y is the dependent variable. And we should know how to use the formula to get the slope and the intercept for that equation. You also need to know how to write your equation into the correct form. Okay, both R value and for the regression values, you always need to list your table first. Remember that big table? List all the x value, y value, x squared value, y squared value, x times y value. Then the last row will be the sum of all of the values. After you have all the sum of the values, you are easy to plug into the formulas to find the I would say chapter 10 is the complicated one, but I only ask you to know how to list the table, then do the calculation. So probably we do not have any problems in your final exam. We will not have any problems in your final exam. But I will still ask you to do the homework, to practice how to list the table, how to get the R value, how to get the B0, how to get the B1, and how to write your regression equation. Okay, so that's the chapter 10.